Today we're going to be going over how to mount and install a side-by-side drinking fountain in the trim phase.
So here we have a side-by-side drinking fountain, and here are the specs for it. And we're going to review how to install the drinking fountain, as well as how to use these specs to help you to accomplish that.
Now the drinking fountain that we're going to be using today is going to be the LK drinking fountain. And most drinking fountains are very similar, but we're going to be using LK today. And the first thing that you're going to do after you take the drinking fountain out of the box is you're going to take the bracket off of the back of the drinking fountain itself, and you're going to take that off, and so then that way you can mount your drinking fountain brackets. Now after you take your bracket off, you also need to take off the front panel, so then that way you're able to work with the water lines and the drain and the electrical. So you're going to take that off by pulling out the screws that are in the bottom of the drinking fountain, and there should be 4 of them in each one, and they're very easy to pull off. So just make sure you pull those off, and then you need to carefully take off that cover, and the cover kind of slides into the bottom of the drinking fountain. So just make sure that when you put it back on, you put it on correctly, and everything sits properly. So that's your next step, is just take off that front panel, so then that way you can access everything. So by now you should have been able to locate where your drinking fountain is going. In this situation, it's going to be going into this corner here, and it's going to consist of your clean out, your fixture drain, your cold water supply, as well as your electrical outlet. So you may have noticed that in the back of each drinking fountain there's a L-shaped opening in the back, and it's shown here in the red, and that's the area that you have to fit your stub outs in, and it needs to be in those locations, otherwise your drinking fountains are going to be in the wrong position, and that's the area that you have to make those stub outs. And also another thing is that the specs give you the option to put the water line and the electrical on the right side of the drinking fountain, but we always put it on the left drinking fountain. As you can see in the right picture, that's the right drinking fountain, and the compressor is in there, and it takes up a lot of space, and so we always try to put the water and the electrical in the left drinking fountain, so that way it doesn't take up a whole bunch of space, and you're not having to fight to get your water line and your electrical all set up. So we always put the electrical and water on the left drinking fountain. And so those are the areas that you have to fit your stub outs in. And we're going to go over how to properly locate those using the specs that we were showing earlier. Now here we've taken the specs and we have simplified them so that it's easier to locate what we're trying to find. And the most important thing that we are trying to locate is the bracket, and we need to find the bottom center bracket hole, and that hole needs to be, we need to find the center of it, we need to find the height of it, and then once we figure that out, we can mark everything else out. So in order to find that bottom center bracket, we have to first locate the red center line, which needs to be discussed with either the superintendent as to where it goes, or maybe in this situation we're centered between 2 walls, so we can figure out the center that way. So once we figure out that red center line, we need to figure out the center for each drinking fountain, and what we'll do is we'll look at that top measurement, which is 18 3/8. We're going to round that up to 18 1/2 just to make the math easier, and we're going to split it in half, and it'll be 9 1/4 to the right and a 9 1/4 to the left, and that will give us our center lines for each drinking fountain. And then once we find those center lines, then we're going to figure out the height of our brackets, If you look on the right side, we have the bottom bottom holes of the bracket at 28 and 13/16. And then if you look at the one on the left, our bracket bottom hole is at 34 and 5/16. So we just need to make sure that we locate those properly, and we're able to find those amongst all of the other measurements that were going to be on the specs. So just take your time, find the center line for each drinking fountain, and then you can locate the height of the drinking fountain bracket. And remember, we are trying to find the bottom center hole, and then you're able to mark out the rest of your holes, and then you're able to move on from there. So as we know, the drinking fountain is going to be located in this corner area, and we need to first figure out the distance of that entire area, so that way we can figure out the center. So let's say, for example, that entire area is 60 inches long. So we would split that in half, then the center line would be 30 inches away from each side of the wall. And remember, the center line is our red line, and then we're going to take our 18 and a half, and we're going to split that in half, and it's 9 1/4 to the right, 9 1/4 to the left, and that will find our center lines. So just so you have a visual of what it's going to kind of look like on the wall, this is what you're trying to locate to figure out your center lines. Now, after we have found our centers for our drinking fountain, we will need to now locate the height of our bottom hole for our brackets, and we just need to look onto the specs to find those locations. Once we have those marked out, we now can place the bracket on top of that center line, and we will put a level on it, make sure it is level, and then we can mark out the rest of our holes as shown in that second picture. And once they're all marked out, then we're able to screw in our bracket, make sure it is level, and there should be backing behind the bracket. If there is not, you're going to have to use other methods of supporting, such as a toggle bolt. So just keep that in mind, but that's going to be the next step. Now, before we mount the drinking fountain, we need to put on the trap adapter, and the trap adapter is what connects the ABS or PVC, whatever, the drain to the P-trap, the removable P-trap. So all it is just a male threaded glue-in piece, and it comes with the P-trap. So what you need to do is make sure that that trap adapter is as close to the back wall as it can be. So you're going to want to cut that drain off pretty close to the wall, so that way when you glue on your trap adapter, it's right up against the wall. So usually the drain is going to have a little bit of paint on it or other debris stuff. You're just going to want to kind of try to scrape that off, so that way when you glue it on, it will adhere to the ABS better, and you won't have any leaks. So just make sure that trap adapter is as close to the back wall as you can, so that we can fit the P-trap in the drinking fountain, because there's not a lot of space in there. So now that we have mounted our brackets, we can now place the drinking fountains on the brackets, and we want to make sure that our drinking fountains look center. So we want to make sure that the distance on the right side of our two drinking fountains and on the left side of our two drinking fountains are exactly the same. Because it's in a corner, we want to make sure that it looks nice and centered. So you want to make sure that the distance on the right and on the left look exactly the same, so that it looks nice and centered and professional. Now, if the brackets were put up straight and evenly, you shouldn't have any issues with the drinking fountain being flat. But you do want to make sure that the drinking fountain does sit flat. Sometimes the manufacturer can sometimes get things wrong, and it will sit crooked because of that. And so if that does happen, you might have to kind of shift the back bracket a little bit. But usually you should be fine. If everything is flat with the bracket, the drinking fountain should be flat as well. So just make sure that the the drinking fountains are sitting flat so that they look very professional. So the next thing you'll want to do is install the P-trap and the extension piece. The extension piece should come with the drinking fountain, and then you'll have to provide the P-trap itself. And as you can see on the left side, that's just what all the pieces are. And then on the right two pictures is how it should look once it's all been put together. Now the next step will be to install the water lines, and you need to connect the left drinking fountain to the right drinking fountain, and there should be a connectable T, and you're just going to insert that one to the T, and that should connect the two drinking fountains together. And the next thing will be to install the supply line, which will go to the angle stop, which is the little shutoff, and then that supply line will attach to the water distributor, which is copper. So what we need to put on there is the little brass compression fitting, right? And that'll just screw onto the 3/8 by 3/8 supply line, and then we'll have to use the compression ring for the connection onto the copper. And here is what it's going to look like when you connect up the supply line to the angle stop, and the supply line should easily twist onto the angle stop, and once you have it hand tight, you can take a wrench and just give it a quarter turn. You don't want to turn it any more than that. If you turn it more than that, it could leak. So just try to keep it nice and snug, but not too tight. And then you're going to connect the compression ring, compression coupling, to the copper. And on the right side, you can see that that's what the water that goes to the drinking fountains looks like. And then you just connect it up with that compression coupling. And after you do that, you're going to install your electrical, which you just plug into the electrical outlet. In this picture, they did not have the electrical set up, but you're just going to plug in those two plugins. And if the drinking fountain has a water bottle filler, you're going to need another plug-in. So you'll need to get a small 3-way, and then you can plug that 3-way in. So then that way you can plug in your water bottle filler. So on the left you have the picture of the finished product after all the connections have been put together. And once you do all that, you will put on the cover panel. And just remember that when you're putting it in, it needs to slide up into the drinking fountain, and that's the only way you're going to be able to get it onto there. So just make sure that you're able to slide that in there, and then you can put your screws back in, and it should be all finished from there. And that's how you install a drinking fountain.